Hello, all. It is time to get started. Okay, so I hope all of you are doing well. And I hope you also started the chat. I'm gonna put hi, everyone. Know that you can ask any questions there. I put everyone on mute so that way there won't be any sound issues. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Well, today we are going to go over assignment 7. If you log into Canvas and go into modules, you'll see that chapter 5 PowerPoint is there. I also created a new assignment. Oop. Actually, let me show you. Okay, I am going to share my screen. Okay, so here we go. I need to start up my chat to make sure I read your chats. Okay. Okay, so in the modules, you'll see that there's the chapter 5 PowerPoint. Can you confirm that you see the modules? And I'm also opening up a notepad. Can you put in the chat to confirm that that you do see that? Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, so here is the module here. I added a new assignment, and basically I created that assignment because I need to confirm that everybody is participating in the class. And basically you would just need to submit the pseudocode on this assignment. And that's what we're going to be covering right now. So at the end of this, you'll be able to submit this and be done with it. In addition to that, I also added some videos here. This chapter, we're going to be looking over loops, and there's 3 videos here. There's 3 different loops. There's a while loop, a for loop, and a do while loop. So if you watch those, you can see how they work. And they're available all the time, so you can watch it whenever and however many times you want. I'm also recording this as well, so you'll be able to go back and listen to this video again later. Okay, so here's the assignment here, assignment 7. It's due March 29th, which is Sunday. And basically, you have to basically ask for names from a user, and you're going to ask them, well, first you're going to ask them how many names. Let's see, it prompts the user to enter the number of students in the class. Then we're going to have a loop that will read in so many names. And then once all the names are read in, the program needs to report the first, basically the name that would be first and the name that would be last. And you don't just assume that there's no 2 students with the same name. And most importantly, I'd say, is that this is not a sorting assignment. This is not a sorting assignment. So that means that you don't have to remember all the names. You don't have to put them in order. All you have to do is remember which one would be first and which one would be last. Okay? And in addition to that, you have to do input validation basically, when you ask for the number of students, you want to make sure that it's between 1 and 25. And previously, we have done input validation, and you may have done a loop as well. But input validation, you want to make sure that it's only within this range. So you could do an if statement, you can do a loop. It's up to you how you do it. It doesn't require how you do it here. But I'm going to help you with the pseudocode, and I'm going to go ahead and add that loop in our pseudocode. So let's go ahead and get started. So can you confirm that you see the notepad again? I just want to make sure. Okay, thank you. Okay, so when you're doing pseudocode, what is the first thing that you do? Well, typically you declare variables. Then what do? You'll ask for input. And usually you do some sort of processing, and then you have some sort of output. Okay, well, let's actually put those in comments and make those our sections. Okay, so we are going to, at the very beginning, we're going to ask the user for input. So what is the input? Well, we're first going to ask them how many names. Okay, then we're going to accept the input, and let's just say it's going to be number. Okay, then the processing would be, okay, well, what will the processing be? We know that we need to use a loop, and we know that we need to ask for names. So let's go ahead and say ask for names. Okay, so when you ask for names, of course, you have to accept input. Okay, and let's go ahead and put our variable here. And we already have two variables, so let's go ahead and list those variables now. We have number, which is the number of names, and then we also have name. Those are the two variables that we have so far, name and number. Okay, so going back to the assignment requirements, you're asking for names, and then you're going to find out, or the program needs to figure out which one would be the first in line and which one would be the last. So the question is, how do you figure that out? What in programming can you do that will compare two things? Well, the thing that we've done so far is, if you think about the last assignment, you had to enter a number, evaluate that number, and remember it was the computers. How many computers do you want? And if there's a discount, they get. If they get so many, they get this discount. So many here, they get another discount. So that's how it was evaluating the number that they entered. So now we're evaluating a name. So it's pretty much the same thing. And actually, and we've done numbers before. So the question is, well, how does a computer know the names? Well, let's think back to computers. What do they understand? Do they understand English or German? What do they understand? Well, they understand binary. And binary is just a bunch of ones and zeros that that the computer understands. So basically, if you look at the ASCII chart, if you do a search for ASCII chart, you'll see that basically every character, like numbers and letters, they're all represented by a certain number in computers. And if you see right here, the letter A is number 65. Yeah, and then you go all the way to Z, and then there's more characters, and then lowercase letters. They're different numbers. So basically, we can compare two different letters or a string of letters. So that's something I don't think we've talked about before, a string. A string is basically a list of characters and numbers. So it could be any combination of them. So, and actually that is the type of variable that we're going to be working with. It's going to be a string. So name is going to be string, and we know that number is going to be integer because it needs to be a whole number, and well, it just needs to be a whole number. So now we have number and we have name. So back again, how can you compare two names that somebody enters? Well, when you want to compare something, you want to do an if statement. So now we're going to do, well, and if you look at the second notepad here, I have a list of names. So basically, the user is going to enter a name, and then you're going to compare it to the next name that they enter. So you're going to do an if statement again. So let's go ahead and start off with the if statement. And then you're going to compare a name. Let's just say, and this is just pseudocode, if name is less than name2, then you're going to do something. If name is greater than name2, then you're going to do something else. Okay, so okay, if name is less than name2, do something. If name is greater than name2, then do something. Okay, and also remember that we're asking for a name and then we're accepting a name. So those names are going to be compared. But wait a minute, we have name and then we have name2 here. So we have another variable here. And I actually would recommend not just saying name2, but actually making something that means something. And also remember too, that when we do output, we need to display the first name and the last name in the list. So at some point, we need to compare what they enter to something to determine that it is last, and basically the other one determines if it's first. There. So how does that sound? Do you have any questions? And you can enter them in the chat. Also remember too that you can ask questions at any time, and then I could just keep track of what you have in there. Okay, so going back again to what names. So we're gonna accept name, and if that name that they entered is less than name2, excuse me, name2, then we need to say that it's last. And the name is greater than name2, then we're going to say that it's first. So we might need to move these around to really think, is it really, if this one's less than this one, is it really last or is it first? So that's something that I'm not really thinking about right now. So just keep that in mind. Okay, but see, at some point, okay, so we're like, here we're determining that something is last. So, but what exactly does that mean? Determine if it's last. If one of them is greater than the other one, well, what's going to happen? Well, basically, we need to say that, let's just say I have a variable that represents last name. Okay, so last name will equal what name is. And that's it. So you're comparing the two, and then you're saying, okay, well, this one is going to be the actual last one. And the same thing here, first name is actually going to be the name that is entered. So they enter name, then they evaluate it, and then they say, okay, well, this one is the last name. They evaluate it here. Well, this is the first name. Any questions so far? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, so that's generally, you're asking for input, you're asking for names, and you're evaluating it, and then you're displaying it. Okay, that is a general pseudocode, but we could still go further because, well, first of all, we need to do input validation. We need to make sure that when they enter how many names, it needs to be between 1 and 25. So remember earlier I said you could use an if statement or you could use a loop. And the better thing to use would be a loop. Now I'm indenting these because when you have an if statement, just like you have here, whatever's inside of it is indented. Well, also when it comes to a loop. So you have a loop, and I'm going to go ahead. Remember in pseudocode, you don't have to do, all the different characters, but sometimes it helps to determine where something starts and where something ends. So you're completely free to do that. And that's what I want to do here. So there's going to be a loop to ask how many names and then allow the user to enter a number. Okay, now, and also earlier I mentioned that there's different kinds of loops. There's a while loop, a for loop, and then a do while loop. Now, basically you have to know the differences between the three and determine which one would be the best one to use. Okay, so, and I would say there's two main types. There's one of them where it actually counts a certain type, a certain amount of iterations in the loop. Like if you know you want it to go 5 times, well then you use the for loop. And then if you don't know how many times you want the loop to iterate, then you want to use either the while or the do while. Now, let's go ahead and do the while here because you don't know how many times they're going to have to go through this loop. Again, why are we doing this loop? We are doing this loop because we want to make sure that they give us the right information. We don't want them to type in 50. We want them to type or enter 1 through 25. So this loop is for input validation. And put the comments there because it's not part of the code. Okay. So when you do a loop, you will usually have something in parentheses, like we do with our if statements. So while what? Why would we keep on going through this loop? Well, because we need to validate the input. So if or while the number is less than 1 and greater than 25, we want to keep on asking them. While it's less than 1 and greater than 25, we want to keep on asking. So let's just say you go into this loop and number is 5. Do we want to ask them how many times? No, because it's a good number. Let's say it's greater than 25. Let's say it's 50. Do we want to ask them? Yes, we do, because it's a bad number. Does that make sense? Do you have any questions about that? Okay, I am going to go ahead and continue. Again, feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Okay, so we just did the while here, and the while is you're basically validating the input, and it could run as many times as the user wants to enter a bad number. Now, to be user friendly, not only would we ask how many times, but we might even want to ask them, or actually tell them, please enter a number between 1 through 25. Now you're actually telling the user what number to do. If you don't tell them, then they could just keep on running this loop, confused. I don't know why it's wrong. Well, if you tell them what is valid, then you're more likely to get a good number. Okay, so that's the while loop. Now, think about this while loop. When you go into this loop here, how do you know what number is? You have int number up here, but we don't have what the number is at the beginning. So you don't know what number is until you ask it, but it's actually inside of this while. So to tell you the truth, if you want to ask how many names, it's actually better if you ask this first and then check if it's okay. So now we're looking at a do while loop. You want to do this first, then check if it's valid. And then if it's valid, well, then you can move on. If not, that's when it's going to loop again. So does that make sense on the difference between the while and the do while? Do while, you want to do this and then check it and repeat if necessary. Okay. So that was the difference between the while loop and the do while. Okay, so that's pretty much it. You're asking for the names, you're getting the input, and you're doing the input validation here. So now that we have a good number, let's say it's 5 names now. Now we're going to ask for those names, and then we're going to do the evaluation. Well, we need to keep on asking for the names as many times as they entered here. So that actually means that all of this needs to go in a loop, because we need to keep on asking and comparing 5 times. Okay, so then we're going to go ahead and create a loop. We're going to open this loop. We're going to indent everything in that loop. The if statement gets indented even further, or the stuff in the if statement. And now we're going to close that loop. Okay, so at this point, now noticed earlier that we did a do while, and then we also looked at while. Well, what kind of loop are we going to do now? Are we going to do the while, or are we going to do a do while? Well, what about that for loop? Those 3 different types of loops. So the for loop, the difference between the for and these while loops is that the for loop will do it as many times as you say. When it comes to the do while or the while, it will do it as many times as necessary. It can do it for infinity. But the for loop, it knows exactly how many times. So do we know exactly how many times we're going to do this loop? We do. because we asked the user how many times up here. So that's why we want to do the for loop. Now the for loop is a bit different because while you can have like, and also remember, you have to have number twice. Okay, so while it can just be while number is less than 1, or you can also add number less than 1 and number greater than 25. Okay, so that's how you do the while loop. But when it comes to the for loop, there's 3 different sections. There's where you start, where you end, and the increment. So that's how the for loop looks. Notice how there's commas in between and that it's inside of parentheses. Okay, so how exactly does it look though? Okay, when you start, you tell it how it's going to start, and usually you create a variable here, and I'm going to create X as a variable. You don't have to put it up on top with all the other variables because you're pretty much initializing it and declaring it here. That's very unique about loops. Typically, your variables are on top, but for loops, you can have it all right in here. Okay, so this is how it's going to start. You're going to start at 1. Then how are you going to end? Well, you're going to end when X is equal to as many times as the user wants. How do we know how many times the user wants? Well, they asked, or we asked for it up here. So it's actually number. So X starts at 1, and then when X equals what the user wants, it's going to continue. It's going to keep on going through. So if they entered 5 here, it starts with 1 and then it ends at 5. Now increment, what is that? Increment just pretty much tells it that it's going to count. You would just do X plus plus. It's just going to count once. Or it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you can change it many different ways. Like you can actually add 2. So then it's 1, 3, 5, that kind of thing. But you'll see that in the chapter. But this is your basic way for loops look like. Here's the start, here's the end, and then you have an increment. So if they enter 5 for this number, then it's going to go from 1 to 5, and it's going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 times, it's going to ask for a name, it's going to compare it. Then it's going to do it again for the second time. Ask for a name, compare it, all the way until it gets to 5. How does that sound? Do you have any questions about anything? Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and move on. So basically, after we do this loop, eventually we'll be comparing and figuring out which one is the last name and which one is the first name. After you do that, at the very end, you're going to say, okay, they're going to display something like display last name, or you say something nice to be user friendly. The last name is, and then last name. And the first name is, oops, first name. And that's it. That's all that is required of the program. Does it make sense? Do you have questions? Have we covered everything? If you go back to the assignment, we need to know who is in the front of the line, who is at the end. So we prompt the user to enter the numbers. We did that. It looped to read in the amount of names. Once all of them are read in, it reports, that's the display statement, who's in front, who is at end. We don't have to worry about having two of the same name. It's not a sorting assignment, so we didn't need to remember all of them, only which one would be first and which one would be last. Okay, and we did the input validation with that first loop. So that's pretty much all that we had to do for the assignment. Okay, let me go a little bit further when it comes to this part here. Because, so yes, we have name and we have name too, but we actually need to compare what last name would have and what first name would have. So what I would actually do is start off last name and first name with something. First name and last name. Okay, so first name. Now, we know if we were to look at this list of names here, that my name would be first because it starts with the A. Okay, so I like to initialize first name with just a bunch of Z's because I know that my name is going to be before that one. So I'm going to start it off with a bunch of Z's. Then last name, it would be Sean here. So I want to make sure that I started off with a bunch of A's so that when I compare down here, that it will definitely grab whatever comes in until it reaches the right letter, or yeah, the right name. Okay, so, and also here, know that we're comparing name and name too. But you know what? We actually want to compare the name that they enter compared to the first name or the last name. So not just name two. So we actually want to change this. If name is less than name two, or last name, then last name equal name. If name is greater than first name, then that's when you're going to change first name. So you only want to change the first name if it actually is before what you already have. So first name, it starts off with Z's, but once it goes through this loop, it's actually going to see that, oh, wait, John is before Z's, so I'm going to put John as first name. Then it's going to go through the list again. Well, now, since you assigned John as the first name here, well, now it's going to go to Ryan. Well, is Ryan before John? Actually, no, it isn't. So it's not even going to do that. Is Sean before John? Again, we're doing this loop, and Sean is not before John, so it's not going to do this. Dominique, is Dominique before John? Yes, it is. So that's when it's going to assign name to that first name. And then it's going to go again, that last name, or the last loop, the last iteration of the loop. Then it's going to see my name. And yes, A is before D. So that's where first name is going to be assigned there. So do you see how it keeps on looping and it keeps on evaluating the names that are being entered here? It evaluates them every time. Then it assigns it if it meets that condition, and then you'll know what last name and first name is. Make sense? And I believe that should be pretty much it. Glad it makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's it. So now it's just a matter of going into the textbook and finding what code you need to exactly, to do these things. Got your do while, you're evaluating numbers, make sure you have your semicolons. This is C out, so it needs the angle brackets, semicolons at the end. For statements do not need a semicolon at the end. Yeah, I would say that's pretty much it. I want to make sure that you know that I know that we are going to be doing this online for a while, who knows how long. So just know that, you can contact me if you have any questions. You can send me your C++ file and I can look at it and give you feedback. At any time. It doesn't have to be when the assignment's due. So it's best if you do that before the assignment's due. But also know that we have BrainFuse, which is the online tutoring. If you go into Canvas, you see BrainFuse online tutoring. You get 5 hours for free, and they do help with C++. And if you do try that, please let me know so I can just be aware of how it is working with them. But I also want to tell you that we have tutors, and yes, we had tutors on campus, but the tutors are still available online, and they could do a Zoom session with you just like I'm doing here. Of course, I have you on mute, but when you're having a Zoom session with one person, you guys can talk to each other, or me and you can do it. So just know that you're not alone in this, and you do have resources to help you out. Are there any questions? Yeah, you can meet with me. Just let me know and we can schedule something and go from there, but not before noon. But yeah, just let me know if you want to meet or whatever. Any questions about anything else? I will be posting this video in Canvas. I'm going to try to upload it in YouTube, and then I'll provide a link here. So that way you can watch this over and over again. So if you don't have any questions, that's pretty much all I have for you. And also know too that maybe if you just don't understand something else, I can make another video just describing that one thing. So just let me know. To get out of this Zoom, all you have to do is just click the X. You're welcome. You're welcome. Just click the X on the very top and you will be out. And again, just know that I'm here for you. Are we sending the pseudocode separate from the assignment? Yes, please. And I want to see that assignment or if you could submit the pseudocode now would be really great. Thanks.